I don't know if the Seattle Seahawks will go down as being thought of as a dynasty in the National Football League. If they had won that second straight Super Bowl, they probably would and probably should at that point. But I don't know if they will be thought of that way, and they probably shouldn't be. Because again, a major measurement of a dynasty is an extended period of success with multiple world titles. And the Seahawks have just one of them. They've had a sustained period of success between 2010 and 2016. Over the course of that 7-season stretch, they made the playoffs 6 times. Talking about a team that went to a Super Bowl, won it in 2013, and shut down and slammed the door entirely on an all-time great regular season offense in that 2013 Broncos offense led by Peyton Manning. And then the next year they're back in the Super Bowl, and they get this close to beating the New England Patriots and Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and winning back-to-back. This is a team that's still been in the playoffs 2015, 2016. It's hard to maintain a consistent level of success in the National Football League. And General Manager John Schneider and head coach Pete Carroll do deserve a ton of credit for that, because they haven't always done it conventionally. They haven't always done it the way everybody else does, where the league went very offensive and very spread wide open and all of this, and defense didn't matter as much. This was a team that played a little closer to the vest in terms of the more traditional, we're going to play defense, we're going to run the football, and we're going to make big plays in the passing game when we need to. It worked for the Seahawks. I don't know how many other organizations it would work for, but it most certainly worked for them. But you know that nothing can last forever. And you could also see the writing on the wall over the past couple of seasons that, especially after that loss in the Super Bowl, the vibe of this organization just has not been the same. And how could it be? And even though they found a way to get back into the playoffs in 2015 and 2016, you just feel like that window of opportunity was starting to close and is starting to close. And I can tell you this much, based off of what we saw in the 2017 season, it feels like that freaking window is slamming shut on the Seahawks in terms of their window of opportunity. Which, you look at this team, and you had the trade before the season for Sheldon Richardson. You give up a second-round pick to get him, but it made sense. You need an interior edge rusher to go with guys you think like Bennett, Clark, Averill on the edge, something that was missing, somebody like a Sheldon Richardson. And when you're at this point in time where you don't have a ton of young depth on the bench ready to come in and fill that role, you need impact players and difference makers because you're trying to win a championship. So in that sense, it makes sense to try and make that type of move. And then, more importantly, in the middle of the season, you make the deal to get Dwayne Brown. You're giving up again, I think, a third-round pick as part of that deal. But now you're getting a guy that's at least a solid blindside protector for Russell Wilson that they've needed so very, very, very badly. Again, these are the moves of a team that are not worried about the future, nor they should they be, because it's all about the present, the here, and the now, because they can sense that that window is starting to close. And like I said, based off of what we saw this season, you could really feel that it's starting to slam shut on them. But with all that being said, and even with the Seahawks at times being the Seahawks and not playing the most glamorous style of football, after 12 games, this was an 8-4 football team. They were definitely in the mix. I mean, they were right in the mix in the playoffs. They were right in the mix in the division. The NFC at the top was pretty loaded this year, yes, but they were right there. You handle your business better at the end of the year, you're in the playoffs. And with that playoff experience and with Russell Wilson and the MVP type of caliber season that he was having, really putting that offense on his back, that team you could argue on his back, who knows what could happen? Maybe you get hot at the right time and you go on a revenge tour and try to win another championship. And maybe people do start thinking about you as a dynasty. But then those last 4 games of the season happen. You go to Jacksonville, lose there. You host the Rams, and they come into your house and kick your teeth down your damn throat. Yeah, you beat Dallas in Week 17. That's great. But knowing, no matter what, you were in a position at 9-6, that you absolutely had a must-win situation, that the only chance you had to get in the playoffs was for you to win and Atlanta to lose, but you ultimately had to take care of your own business first. You couldn't worry about Atlanta. You had to worry about beating Arizona, and then you couldn't get that job done. And it felt like the Jacksonville game was where everything really went off the rails. They're getting into it, multiple players with the fans in the stands, and then you come back the next week and you get smoked in your house by the Rams. You know, even the returning Ezekiel Elliott, you were able to get over that because the Dallas Cowboys imploded themselves. But then to come out week 17 and not be able to handle your business against a divisional opponent that has absolutely nothing to play for, that's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And when you look at the Seahawks team, it was different in 2017. 4-4 at home. A team that is thought of to have this great home field advantage that it's so tough to go in there and win. They were a 500 team at home. 2 of the last 4 games of the season at home, you lost them to the Rams and to the Cardinals. That can't happen. The number one thing you could do, and one of 2 things you could do as a team trying to control your fate for the playoffs, win in your own division, win at home. You do that consistently, you'll consistently be in the mix. The Seahawks didn't win at home this year nearly enough compared to previous years. 4-4 at home. It just can't happen that way. And injuries most certainly played a part in what happened with this team. They only got 9 games this year out of Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman. You only got 4 games out of Cliff Averill, and they might be the last 4 games you ever get out of him. The running game was a complete and total mess. I mean, Russell Wilson was your leading rusher, and I think the next closest guy was Mike Davis, and he had 240 yards on the season. And then when you talk about those injuries, the secondary was susceptible at times, and in particular what was more surprising was the Seahawks' run defense wasn't very good. This was a team for years that you would talk about the Legion of Boom secondary, and that's all great, but the real keys to the success of the Seahawks to me in a lot of ways were Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson and the Seahawks' ability to run the ball consistently against anybody. Then defensively, they could generate a lot of pressure with their front 4, and they made it really hard to run against them. Then you play into the hands of that Legion of Boom secondary, and it's good night, Irene. Well, they couldn't run the ball in 2017 outside of Russell Wilson, and their run defense just wasn't very good. So 2 of the most important pieces of that formula just weren't the same. They weren't as effective. And for a team that's built off of needing those 2 places to be really, really sound, it's really hard to be successful when 2 of the keys to your success aren't very successful. So ultimately, 2017, they ended up 9-7 and they missed the playoffs. You know, they still had a winning record. It just doesn't feel like the same Seahawks anymore. And like I said, it feels like that window has almost slammed shut on them. And part of the reason is, and one of the challenges for a team like this, with a sustained period of good play with some excellence mixed in, is that you get a lot of these guys, you keep them because of loyalty and so forth, and you have a lower draft position, so you miss out on premium players. Makes it much more important to evaluate well based off of your system, the fit of the talent to what you do, is that you get a lot of old players. And when you look at this Seahawks team, so many of their key players heading into 2018 are going to be 30 or older in that season. Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin, Jimmy Graham, if he's even brought back as a free agent. Dwayne Brown. On the defensive side of the ball, Cliff Averill, and like I said, he might never play again. Michael Bennett, if they even keep him. Richard Sherman, coming off of an Achilles injury. Cam Chancellor, who missed 7 games this year. I mean, you can take a look at that and you say, this team's quarterback, their number 1 wide receiver, their big-time tight end that they gave up a first-round pick in part to get, their 2 best edge rushers, outside of maybe Frank Clark, but guys that have been so important for them for so long, in Averill and Bennett. Their 2 best secondary players, not named Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor, they're all 30 or older. And you can say, well, 30 is not necessarily a death wish in the NFL in terms of a player's career. But in a lot of cases, you can get to a point where they start to fall off that cliff very, very quickly. It is kind of a magical number and a threshold for a reason. Doesn't mean it'll happen with all of them. But it's going to start to catch up with this team, and it is starting to catch up with this team, and hence why guys like Chancellor and Sherman and Averill started missing games, because that abuse on the body starts to catch up. And then when you combine that with the absolute lack of major impact players out of the past several years of drafts for this team, you really start to get a picture of that window of opportunity may have already closed. You look back to the 2013 draft, that's the draft, if you remember, they gave up the first-round pick to the Vikings for Percy Harvin. The only player left from that draft on that team, if I recall correctly, is Luke Wilson, and he's a backup role-playing tight end. The 2014 draft, Paul Richardson, Justin Britt. So a couple of nice players, but they're not difference makers. 2015, Frank Clark, Tyler Lockett. Clark can be a difference maker as an edge rusher when he's not beating women. And Tyler Lockett, again, another role player type of guy. 2016, Jermaine Ifedi, Jerron Reed, role player type of guys. Ifedi, not very good. 2017, you had guys like Shaq Griffin and Delano Hill. That got opportunities not so much because of their talent, but because of injuries. And the fact that they were needed to be in there, that the team needed them to play, not necessarily just that they wanted them to play. And you look at that, and you look at, like, in 2017, when you spend your first pick in round 2 on a buster like Malik McDowell, who, when he's not getting into off-season ATV accidents and can't report on time, he's getting arrested for disorderly conduct in Atlanta in December. It's not hard to see how the Seahawks are in a bad place. They don't have the talent and depth that they once had. A lot of guys that they drafted just haven't panned out. It's hard to replicate that formula continually. And oh, by the way, I freaking told everybody about Malik McDowell. If I got to eat it about the things I'm wrong on, I should be able to celebrate and rejoice on the things that I'm right about. And I was clearly right on him, and I feel comfortable saying that after 1 year. Because what did he do this year? Nothing. Exactly. I rest my case. But now you go into the offseason. Where are the Seahawks going to get any better? They don't have much in the way of cap space. They're under $15 million in cap space. They got free agents like Jimmy Graham, Paul Richardson, Sheldon Richardson, Deshaun Shedd, Byron Maxwell, Blair Walsh, Luke Jokel. They got a lot of guys that they got to figure out a way to try and keep, or a lot of guys that they got to let go and potentially replace. I mean, you just gave up a second-round pick to get Sheldon Richardson. You didn't get a deal done with him. Did you really just give up a second-round pick for a one-year rental for a guy that didn't make a ton of impact for you? Jimmy Graham, a guy who once gave up Max Unger and a first-round pick to get. Are you going to let him go in free agency? Probably not, but it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of that cap space available to tie him up. Then you still got to figure out how to get things done potentially with Richardson and so forth. I'm glad I'm not John Schneider and Pete Carroll right now because they got a lot of tough decisions to make, and we'll see what they do. Looking ahead to the draft, though, they don't have a lot of picks. They've got their first-round pick, which is 18th overall. Then I think they've got a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, and a couple of 7ths. I could be wrong, and if I am, I apologize. The point is they've got their first-round pick, and then they're going to pull the old Jerry Jones. We're going to dominate day 3. The number one thing the Seahawks need in this draft, they need more picks. The number 2 thing they need is they need to do better with the picks that they have. The number one thing they need in terms of a player or position that must be addressed is the running back position. Obvious. You can't roll in with Eddie Lacy and Mike Davis and Chris Carson and Thomas Rawls. They tried to go this retread route and the unheralded guy thinking that we see certain traits in them, we believe in our system. The way this team is built, they need a factor back. They need a difference maker. They need a hoss like they had with Beast Mode Marshawn Lynch. They don't have that. That is the number one goal of the program in terms of getting better in terms of your talent. You need a running back. Then you still got to upgrade that offensive line, I feel like, on the interior of that line. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you need to get some more young depth on that defensive line, especially if Sheldon Richardson leaves in free agency. Especially if Cliff Averill can't play anymore, especially if you potentially release Mike Bennett, you're going to have needs both at defensive end and defensive tackle. I really don't like the way this 2017 season played out for the Seattle Seahawks because it feels like you've seen the Rams shoot by them, and it feels like the 49ers are about to shoot by them too, and the Seahawks and the Cardinals are going to get caught up in the wake and get left behind the times. I'd be stunned if the Seahawks make it back to the playoffs in 2018, and I'll be stunned if Pete Carroll is coaching this team more than one season.